Hey, what's going on? Just finished Mario RPG. Great game, so I'm going through these retro games. That's why I want to do these retro reviews. I just want to play some games I never got to play when I was younger, didn't have the money or whatever, my parents wouldn't get it or couldn't play it, wasn't good enough, didn't understand it. So, I just played Super Mario RPG. Great game. I honestly loved it. I would say that it's probably in the top best Super Nintendo games. I could say that confidently from the Super Nintendo games I've played. I put it up there with Super Metroid. I want to just kind of explain a lot of different things about this game. I'll talk about the good and the bad. There's definitely some bad overall for a game on the Super Nintendo, especially an RPG turn-based game like that. It's pretty impressive for the Super Nintendo era. So right off the bat, you have a role-playing game for the Super Nintendo that's made by Square. You could just say immediately that, okay, you're gonna get some sort of quality when you see a game made by Square, especially Square of the 90s, not Square Enix of today. Not that I'm saying Square Enix is bad, I still think they're an exceptional company. I just find that they were a lot more impressive, pumped out way more quality in a shorter amount of time. Take into account, I do understand that the production time for games nowadays is a lot longer, I guess, than back then, or more difficult. But I'm not too sure about that myself because I'm not a developer. Game starts off really basic storyline, I would say, nothing too in-depth, pretty straightforward. You're really not saving the princess necessarily. I don't want to give away too many things, but it's kind of like a save the world kind of a game. So, storyline's okay, nothing too crazy. It has a very authentic Mario feel to it. Kind of cheesy, but sort of has that Mario charm, especially in the end cutscenes. They kind of follow, certain traditions that Nintendo likes to do. And plot-wise, I'd give it a 9, actually, because it has this quirkiness to it, and dialogue is very comical at times, and it still managed to retain this younger audience without being too mature, but kept you entertained. Whereas I feel the main plot necessarily isn't that entertaining. The way it was brought about was very entertaining and done in a very, almost sly manner, that they were able to kind of transform this very basic storyline into a really fun, quirky, interesting experience. So I would actually give it a 9. Even though I personally didn't like it that much, I find it very impressive the way it was executed and for what it is, So even the fact that it's a Mario game, the storyline was exceptional for a Mario game. So in context, I give it a 9. Now the combat, I thought the combat was really good for a Super Nintendo game. Now, I don't think that the combat would be necessarily better than Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy V. I wouldn't really put them on that same playing field, honestly, because it's definitely a watered-down RPG. It seems like it's very geared for children, younger audience, younger generation of kids at the time of the 90s. But it did retain all of these RPG elements, for the most part, the important ones, of Final Fantasy games. So it really did feel like a Final Fantasy game. For example, instead of using Ether for magic power, we use flower power, FP. Same idea. HP was there. Use mushrooms, different types of mushrooms in your inventory to heal. You equip weapons, you equip armor, and accessories that all do certain things. Kind of remind me of Final Fantasy games in that respect. Everybody had their own specific magic move. Now here's the thing. They call them specials, but they're pretty much magic. And you can't teach a move to a different character. So each character in the game has their set type of move that they could do as a special. So you really have to pick your team carefully, because if you have a healer, they were already designed to be the healer. If you have a tank character, he's designed to be a tank character, etc. You can't really specify the job for the character. They're already kind of predetermined. That's what I mean by it's kind of a simpler, watered-down RPG. But a lot of the elements are there. The turn-based was fair, was interesting. Everything was pretty much there. As for the actual RPG element, I thought it was great. You get more than 3 party members. For instance, you can only have 3 party members on the screen, similar to Final Fantasy VII, but you can switch your team in the menu. You have more than 3 characters in the game, but you could switch them in and out. The thing that I did like is that every character in this game leveled up at the same rate, even if they weren't in your party. That was something that made my OCD feel very relieved, because I didn't have to worry about, oh, let me bring in so-and-so because they're not getting the experience. That wasn't an issue. Everybody leveled up at the same time. I really did enjoy that. And I also think it was kind of cool. Every time you level up, you get to pick a bonus. All your stats would get brought up. You would also get to pick a bonus, like which one of your stats do you want to even get a little more. So, you could either pick more HP, attack and have more defense, or take away more magic and have more magic defense. So there was like 3 categories that you could choose from. That added a little something. There's lots of mini games. I don't want to get into them and kind of ruin the game, but a lot of creativity in the gameplay, even when you're not fighting. On the levels, there's lots of platforming. There's just tons of things to do. For a Super Nintendo game, it was really impressive. There's just a lot to do. And I can't even believe that this was a game for the Super NES. It just was so in depth. For a game at that time. And even though it was like a simpler RPG, and I wouldn't say necessarily easy, because there are very difficult points, but even though it was a simple RPG, it still retained its complexity in a different way. So it had a lot of variety in gameplay, and they just did it in their own Nintendo way, and it was great. It was really great. So gameplay, as crazy as it sounds, I'd have to give it like a 10, because you got to take into account, the time period. And for what it is, its context. I'm not going to compare this against Final Fantasy VI or something, but for a Mario game, it's like a 10. I don't really understand how the gameplay could have been much better. Granted, there are very annoying parts of the game. We'll get into that later, though. But every game has their annoying thing. Yeah, I would give it a 10. 10 for gameplay. I give it a 10 on gameplay. Graphics, I think the graphics are great. We can go over this one pretty quick. Looked like everything was made 3D. Obviously, Super Nintendo didn't have the right 3D chip to pull it off. Looked like they took 3D models, squished them down, flattened them out, and now you have like a game that kind of gives you the illusion that it's 3D, but it's not, but it is. For instance, you can walk on a 3-dimensional plane. The sprite of Mario and all the characters aren't 3D. You can only see them at certain angles. They're just flat 2D. So there's lots of 2D elements on a 3D plane that you walk on. So it's kind of like half 3D. But since all the things seem to be designed 3D first and then were flattened, all the images which are flat are coming from a 3D design. So in combination with walking on a 3D plane, you have a little bit of 3D in there, and then all the assets were actually once 3D. When they mix the two together, it starts to feel like a pretty 3D game. During the battling, all the sprites were used from 3D. Even the angle of the battling is on a 3D perspective. Everything's like on an angle. Personally, I think they did a great job with the graphics. It could seem to be a little choppy. This is the Super Nintendo, but it can get a little annoying. It gets a little overwhelming because there's lots of detail, lots of things came from 3D models, and they all got smushed down and flattened. And it looks good, but it could start to almost get heavy on your eyes, how blurry it is at times. But the real only issue I have with the graphics is the fact that sometimes the perspective was a little difficult to figure out. Sometimes I would think that a coin was directly above my head, but it was really in the distance. Things like that, because the perspective, they were faking this 3D perspective. They were half faking the 3D effect. So some of the 2D elements, which were meant to trick you into thinking that they were 3D, sometimes would seem that were closer when they're really further away, or vice versa. And that can get annoying when trying to reach certain chests and do certain things. So I couldn't really give it a 10 because I ran into that problem quite a few times. I'd have to give that a 9 though. So so far this game is getting a great review regardless. That's the only thing I can think of. You got to take points off for that. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt because I respect it. So graphics, a 9. Since these are old school games, I'm going to factor in sound into this. They don't do that anymore. So whenever I do a review like this, if it's a retro game, I'm probably just going to follow this guideline that I'm kind of just making up right now. So we're just going to go with sound. Sound, music was great. The effects are great. Everything was synced great. I had no issues with sound. Very clear. It seemed like they used a lot of the sound card in the Super Nintendo at the time to do this. And there was a lot of variety in sound, I thought, too. There was a lot of different music. Boss battles had their own music, and even the final boss had his own theme. So I think the sound, I'd give it a 10. Actually, I don't. I'd have to give that a 9. I'd actually have to give that an 8. Reason being is because as good as the music is, it wasn't groundbreaking. The music was good, but I wouldn't say, oh, I want to go on YouTube or I'm going to go seek out this song and listen to it. It really wasn't good outside of the game itself. So I wouldn't say these are amazingly composed songs, but sound quality was amazing. The songs are all right. I give it an 8. Fun factor. That's the final thing. Bottom line, how fun is this game? For the time, if I had this game for the time, I'd tell you that this is like a 9 in the fun factor. The only reason I couldn't give it a 10 is because certain puzzles were almost impossible, like the maze. They weren't very clear, and certain things were very annoying. Jumping on the nuts on the bolts is a section towards the end. I don't want to give away too much, but that was very annoying. It was cool that there was platforming, and it was great that they brought in that Mario element to an RPG, and they really used the gameplay outside of the battle as real gameplay. They tried to like mimic Mario on the level itself, rather than, grinding and fighting like Final Fantasy. It was like the level. They were trying to make it feel like Mario, but they failed a bunch of times. But overall, the game was still extremely fun, interesting. I had a great time. I wish I played it when I was younger. It probably would have been one of my favorite games of all time if I did. Unfortunately, I did not. Oh, and the fun factors are 9. Would I recommend this game? Of course. I think this is one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. It's up there with Super Mario World, Super Metroid, even maybe the Final Fantasy games that came out. I have to replay those and finish those, but I can't say for sure. But Super Metroid is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games, and Super Mario World is too. And I put it up there with those two games. So if you're thinking about playing this game, I tell you right now, do it. I would give it like 2 to 3 hours to give it a real chance to kind of start feeling it out. If you don't like it within 2 or 3 hours, then the game is not for you. It's definitely for me. I'm an RPG fan. If you don't like RPGs, stay away from this game, especially turn-based RPGs. If you do like RPG games, I would definitely give this game a chance. If you have a Super Nintendo Classic Mini, whatever it's called, it's on there. Definitely play it. You have no excuse not to give it a try if you have that. And if you have any other means of getting games, which I'm sure we all do, going to that garage sale. No, but seriously, give it a shot. It was good. I liked it. Have a great night, guys. If you really watch this video, I'll make more. I play a lot of games, play a lot of music, and I draw a lot. It's pretty much my life. Trying to put it out there on YouTube is one of my first thorough reviews of a game. Just finished it today, actually. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. Thanks again. Please follow and subscribe for Christmas. If you're feeling nice, get some karma points up, help out a random guy. And I hope to see you in the comments. I'll be making more videos. If I get some subscriptions, get some views from this, I'll be making way more frequently. And I have some video editing skills, graphic design skills, so I can use them more and go full production mode. Thanks again.